Okay, the recording has begun.
Thank you. It is now minutes after 2. I'm calling our April 9, 2020 meeting to order. Dr. Head, has our meeting today been properly posted according to the law?
Yes, it has been posted in accordance with the law.
Okay, thank you very much. And for record purposes, I'm going to do a roll call of all trustees. And if you will acknowledge by saying here or present, I would appreciate it. The call list is in alphabetical order. Linda Good? Linda, are you there?
Linda, you have to unmute your microphone.
So click the button to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay.
Thanks, Linda. Ken Lloyd? Guess not. Art Murillo?
Present.
Thank you. Ernestine Pierce? Well, I doubt she can respond.
I haven't been able to find her in the call list. She says she's on. She did text, she said a chat that she is on.
Okay. All right, I'll confirm that later on. Okay, Miriam Saldivar? Mike Stoma?
Here.
Okay, thank you. Mike Sullivan?
He's on the line.
Okay, thank you. Absent. Okay. So we have 6 either present or on the line and 3 absent. Okay, thank you all for coming today. And before we start our meeting, I have a couple of general comments that I would like to make on behalf of the board. First thing I would like to say, I would like to thank the entire board for their prayers and support during this unusual period of time. Secondly, I would like to say hats off to all of our administrators, professors, other staff, and students of Lone Star College for a job well done. I know, and we know, that there were some difficulties, things that you've encountered, but based on reports that we have heard, we are going to be able to meet all of the needs of our entire community, not only our students and faculties and et cetera, but the community at large. And we're going to meet this need to the maximum extent possible. We as a board love the way you have converted our system to deliver an educational product in a relatively short period of time. And we like the way that you have been able to do this remotely without a lot of complaining from our standpoint. So thank you very much for a job well done along those lines. Thirdly, I would like to tell the police department that they have done their usual outstanding job of making sure that our property and our assets are protected 24/7. Thank you, Mario, for heading up this particular team. In respect of your time, I will now stop talking. Just another plain thank you from the trustees. As usual, as usual, I will say, we want to make sure that we maintain the momentum and always remember to keep the main thing, the main thing. Since this meeting is on a teleconference, we want to make sure that we follow the agenda and don't hesitate to ask questions that you may have as we go along. So thank you everyone for your efforts. We know that Lone Star is going to be a continued success as a result of these efforts. So with that, I will stop and ask whether we have anyone wishing to make public comment.
Trustee Smith, we didn't have anybody sign up for the public comments section today.
Okay, good, thank you. At this point in time, we're going to have a discussion of the impact of COVID-19 on our business. And I would like, Dr. Head is going to start this off and kind of moderate it all the way through.
Okay.
Dr. Head, as you make your comments, at some point in time, please remind us as board members of things that we can do to assist guys with delivering the product that we have been chartered to deliver.
Okay.
With that, Dr. Head, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Okay.
Do you want to briefly go through if a board member has a question or how to get our attention?
I think that they're not take themselves off of mute. Just ask the questions as we go along. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that they knew if they can either, if they're on mute, they can hold up their hand.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna let Link. Would you go ahead and cover that for us, please?
Yes, sir. While you're on here, you can put raise hand, or you can actually just unmute if you have a question as a panelist. Raise hand is if you're an attendee, but just unmute and then ask your question as a panelist. Sir, I've also passed keyboard control over to you so you can advance your presentation.
Okay. So board, the order today was I have about a 10-minute overview of where we are, and then I'm going to ask Mario to talk about what the situation is with our employees and our students and some of the ways that we're making decisions about facilities and the protocols. Then Dwight Smith will have an overview of the instruction and how we've made that transition, what's happening there and what we're looking at for the future. And then Jennifer Mott will go through the finances at the end. So in the next meeting, and we'll talk about a schedule, I'll have some of the presidents come in and just for the sake of time today, we have so much going on that we could probably talk to you for a couple of hours about this, but so we will have time for questions in the middle of all this and toward the end. If I wanted to really echo what Dr. Smith said, we have thousands of people working on this. We have over 7,500 employees. Most of them have been involved in this transition, and it's been the presidents. I'll have to tell you, the presidents have really stepped up and taken care of the students and the employees, not only at the campuses, but also at the centers. We still have, as of earlier this week, we had 66,000 students still enrolled. We've only lost about 200 students since March the 15th, which is a really good sign for us. Now, we've moved the drop date back, so we may see more. And two other issues before I get into the presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about stimulus money, but we finally got word today, like right before this meeting, like 10 minutes before this meeting, about the provisions for that. And I think it's going to be very helpful to us. And then secondly, we still don't know what the state's thinking about right now. We know that that's an issue, but I'll let Jennifer talk a little bit more about that. So I'm just going to run through kind of where we are, what we're thinking about. And so just bear with us because this is new for everybody. So, okay, and Link, I do not have control of this. Link, are you giving me control of it?
Sorry, I was still on mute. Doing it now, you should see it. Did it give you control or not?
I don't have control of it.
Okay, why don't I go ahead and advance it so we can keep it moving?
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to know, so let me just point this out, that a lot of these ideas I got, the board has sent me information, other people have sent me information, but a lot of the kind of the outlines of what I'm talking about came from a report that I saw in McKinsey. And Art, you had sent me a couple of things, and then it led to some other articles I read. So I wanted to put this in here because they had some really good ideas for a blueprint that I thought fit us really well. Okay, Link. Okay. So this is kind of where we are, and I've broken this down, board, really in the way we're thinking about this in these general areas. And I'll come back and talk a little bit about this. And keep in mind that this is very fluid. It changes every day. And so the numbers change and what we're thinking about change, and we're waiting. We got money, word on the stimulus, but it just depends on a lot of things where we are. So this is the way we generally, though, we've broken this down and trying to take in each individual area and see what we need to do with that. So I'll come back through this in just a minute. Okay, Lee. So this is what we've done so far. And again, there's some overlap in the dates here, but I mean, and I'm not going to run through every single thing, but I want you to know that I think we stabilized the operations pretty quickly. And again, things are changing, but from we've made, establishing communications and responsibilities, and board, you have received every major email that's gone out, and there have been dozens of them going out. So we've had them going out from the system office, and the vice chancellors, and I've been sending them out, and then the presidents have been sending out. I know the VPs and the deans have been sending out. So we've got a communication system. We're pretty clear operationally about who's responsible for what. We had a high performing team before, but everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. So we're communicating on a regular basis. Our big issue right now has been making this transition to online on academic and workforce. And Dwight's going to talk a little bit more about that, but we've shifted over. We've got a total of about 8,000 classes now that we've shifted over, which is pretty remarkable. And with that, the challenge that we're having is the workforce programs. And Dwight will talk a little bit more about that. But this involves faculty and staff training, students. There's some big issues we have with students. Not everybody has the technology that we need, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we're paying close attention to employee morale and how they're doing. And really the students are our big focus, making sure that they're okay. And then of course the financial planning. Next one, Lee. So this is where we are. So the facilities themselves are closed until May the 4th. We are working remotely, and the employees are being paid full and part-time. We have a budget freeze. And when I say a budget freeze, we're allowing essential expenses. We're not totally freezing the budget. We have operations to move forward. We've also done sweeps, and we're reviewing the budget, and we put a hiring freeze on for the time being, and that's not a hard freeze. We have some essential positions that we know need to be filled, but just in general, we postponed. We can't even have interviews right now, so some of this doesn't. It's just common sense. You can see where we've canceled travel and conferences, and we're just reviewing everything that we do. So if the virus abates, and I mean, you see what I see every day, and we're hoping it does, but this is the way we're looking at things. Students would return to class in the fall of 2020, and we know that we have to have safeguards and social distancing. So Dwight and the presidents and the deans and the VPs and the ABCs are all going to be talking about what that means. And I think that's a scheduling issue. That's a classroom issue. We know over at UP, for example, really at all the colleges, most of the colleges, we have elevators. I think all of them, we have elevators. So we have to be very careful about how many people we put on the elevators, how many are in the stairways at one time. I think we're talking about 6 days a week that we would be scheduling classes to get our students in. And of course, we're also talking about moving large numbers into online. And right now we targeted kind of 50% of what we have for online. And that just depends. All of this depends. My major concern right now for students is we've got a lot of students coming in. Every fall we have over 11,000 students coming in, new students, first time in college students. This is going to be different for them because they're coming out of high school. They will be coming out of high school and with a different experience. So we're going to have to spend some time with them starting during the summer. I am especially concerned about first generation in college, lower income, at-risk students. And that's going to be at Houston North and North Harris, but it's at all colleges. We have that issue. And also the big issue with students is technology. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but a lot of the students do not have access to technology. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, about some possibilities not only with computers, but how they access and how we offer instruction. In addition to our students, of course, it's faculty. Not everyone is proficient in online, although we've been in that transition in a hurry, but that's faculty and staff. And this is not only with the training, but it's also the hardware, the equipment that they have. And you can see on the workforce program, some of these require face-to-face, and we're just having to work that out. We're working with that right now, and you can see the ones that we've got listed here, but there are others. And then if I'll just drop down a little bit about some of these remote services and tutors and advisors and call centers and online exams, that's what we're considering all of that. And then finally, the counseling service to students, especially students. We already had a number of counselors and we've been working through that. And then with the employees, we have EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and we've been sending out notes about that. Next one, Lee. I mentioned this earlier, but this transition that we have into online is, there are a lot of upgrades and just expansions and software. So Link is working on that. We are talking to a couple of different groups about if we, under the stimulus money, it looks like we'll be able to lease computer or have computers that we might put in the library or loan to students. And so that's a big technology issue that we have. I think we can solve these problems, but it's a lot of work, and it's not only getting the technology, but kind of people have to learn how to use it and use it efficiently. Finally, the finances, which Jennifer is going to talk about in a few minutes, the CFO, we're looking at a decline in tuition and fees and more expenditures, and we've got scenarios and reductions of revenues from 5 to 7%, which is somewhere between $20 and $30 million. And again, Jennifer will talk about that in a minute. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we have been thinking about a lot of different things. And so I just kind of put a calendar up here. And Link, if you go to the next one just for a minute. So we've got all these topics in here. And we know that we have to address each one of these. And I would go down on the support of faculty and staff for just, that's a major issue for us. And so keep in mind that we've got about 3,000 faculty that's full and adjuncts, and they've been terrific. I cannot say enough about how they've adapted to this, but we know we need to be a little more consistent in the training and make sure we have a Lone Star College approach. And so Dwight will address that. We also know in the future, what we're seeing right now is that we need to be taking a close look at the guidelines, maybe work from home and how that might work, but we need guidelines over that. And then the financial issues, of course, are the big ones. Keep going, Link. And keep going. We've already discussed some of this. So here's what it looks like in the fall and how we're going to be focused on this. And again, this is kind of a summary of everything that's going on here, but I would jump down to the bottom because I think that if we're looking at a new model of learning and work options for us, I think when we talk about how the board can help a little bit, this is talking about some of this because these are going to be policies and procedures that we're going to be talking about. And Link, if you go to the last one. So we also know that we need to have a business continuity plan. And we know what to do during hurricanes, and we've learned what to do with floods, but this is different. And I don't think any of us, I didn't anticipate that we might be out for 2 months like this with the pandemic. And we also know that this could happen again, or some other crisis could happen. So we're going to be working on different scenarios and everything from finance and facilities and instruction. There's a lot that goes with this. Like we've dealt with issues like who's watering the plants and who's doing the landscaping and who has access and who doesn't access and what instruction looks like and how long we're going to pay people and the whole. This is just the gamut of issues that have been coming along with this. Then we'll come back to recommendations with the board we're actually, I've got the fall of 2020, but that's a continuity plan, but we want to be coming in to the board on a regular basis with recommendations and thoughts. So I think that wraps my part up. Dr. Smith?
Yeah, Dr. Head,
Yes.
I don't know if you've covered this or not, but one of the things I was interested in is what can the board do, to assist you all with doing the things that you plan to do?
Right. Well, we have we've got the operations down. We have a very experienced group of professionals who can handle the operations, but we're going to need the board's input and guidance and approval on a number of different issues. And I just have a couple of them that I put down here. So we do have business to conduct. I mean, we've got ongoing business, and we're going to talk a little bit about our schedule. So the way we're seeing things right now, the next couple of meetings, maybe up until September, would be video, and that could change. But again, there's regular operations that we have, so the board can be expecting that. And the way we've been communicating is with email. Now, I'll come back to this in just a minute. So some other issues we have are the 2021 budgets that we're going back and revamping what we showed you back in February, but we haven't approved the 2021 budget yet. But that's going to involve priorities and compensation, what we might want to do with some of our bond projects. So we're going to be coming back to the board for guidance, recommendations, discussions, however you want to use those words. These are decisions that ultimately the board needs to make. And we talked about changing our schedule, and we'll talk about that right at the end. But I think that what we envision is coming in on a I don't know, with a regular basis, but we'll be coming in with a series of proposal topics or discussion topics and proposals as we make this change into what I'm just going to call the new normal. I think what's been really helpful, well, a couple of things. One, if we want to have regular board meetings, which we're looking at on the calendar, but if we want to have meetings in between, I'll leave that with the board. We're certainly open to do that. I know some of you have talked about that. Lastly, what I would add is a number of you have sent suggestions and recommendations and comments. Those are always helpful, by the way, and they're always welcome because a couple of you one of you mentioned, we thought about the transition that high school students were going through, like mentally, and just that change. We thought about a lot of things, but not really kind of the psychological piece of that. So that's really important. Ernestine Pierce sent a note last night that I shared with a lot of different people over what other colleges are doing. And then I've had some with like technology and what we're doing and what we're thinking about. All those are helpful to us. I would not assume we're trying to think about everything, but if you see something in an article, it's very helpful if you would just forward that on. And I know we've been looking at budgets, and I know Mike Stoma is into technology, and that's helpful to us. And then I know Mike Sullivan has regular updates from the state that you get sometimes before we do, and they have contacts. So those are helpful to us to see what's going on. So I'm open though to us. We have a lot of people working on this. I think overall, right now, we're in about the best shape of any college that I'm aware of because of our funding model and the way we did things. And we've been run pretty efficiently. And with the board policies that we have, it's actually given us some protection and some shielding from some of these effects. It still has an effect on us, a big one. So, but that's what that to me is how the board can help, and staying engaged with us and taking a look at these emails and seeing if they have any questions. And then as we come back with these proposals, or if they have some thoughts, please let us know.
Well, thank you. If you think of other things later on, let us know.
Okay.
So, let us know also. So it's been very helpful. Thank you.
So I've asked Mario, the next part of this is I asked Mario to give an update over how many students, employees, what our practices are, what our policies are, how we have access to facilities. And Mario, other thoughts. And Dr. Smith, you mentioned the police department. And of all the people in the groups, and everybody's worked really hard. I mean, everybody. It's hard to single out one group, but the police are the ones who had the most exposure to this. And I actually think as a group, they're the ones who have probably felt the impact of this. I'll let Mario talk a little bit about that. So,
All right, I guess I'm up. Hello, everyone. Um,
Hi, Mario.
so, hello, sir. How are you, Dr. Smith? So, start with essentially our legal obligation to report cases of COVID-19. So, under the Health and Safety Code, Section 81.042, we have an affirmative legal duty as soon as we learn of a confirmed positive to notify local health authorities and also the state. And so the first thing that we did in legal compliance and HR is we developed this two-a-day report. So we get a report at 12:30 and we get a report at 4:30. And what that report contains is basically anyone who has emailed or called us or told their supervisor or told their instructor that they fear that they have been exposed or have contracted COVID-19. And so the way that we communicate that out is we've sent out, myself included, and the Office of Governance, Accountability, and Compliance to send out notices to all students and all employees, essentially with 2 mailboxes that they are to contact. And so to date, that's been pretty successful. We've gone 160 submissions to that. 17 of them have been referred over to Dr. Scott and the general COVID-19 mailbox. But of those 160, we've had 66 employee submissions and 77 student submissions. And so the breakdown, we track people through several categories. So we have everything from green, yellow, orange, red to burgundy. And so green is basically I've been around an environment that I think I may have contracted it, all the way over to burgundy, which is you have tested positive for it. And so we're keeping track of employees and students along this continuum. And so on the student side, we have gotten 14 confirmed positives, reports of those affecting 5 of our 7 colleges. And we have 4 employees as of this actually last night, and we're still trying to get a hold of them. So one of them is a full-time staff member, another one is an adjunct, and the 2 that came in actually this morning that we're still trying to track down are part-time employees that are also students. So we are double counting those 2 as students and employees. And so we've had 14 students. Luckily, it sounds like 2 of those students have made a full recovery. And so again, we're tracking them through the continuum. We're keeping track of the quarantining, their doctor's visits, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with our employees. We are sort of tracking them. Now, let me talk to you real quickly just about the employees. So we had both employees were from Sci-Fair. One of them was or is a staff member that essentially came on March 18th to the laptop retrieval. I'm sorry, not the laptop, the come get your stuff from your office day, which was March 18th from 8 to 4 at Sci-Fair. And that person later on did test positive for COVID-19. And so Dr. Keshvala and the chancellor sent out a notice to all Cypher employees. And we have identified, I think at last count, there was 205 employees that were there that day, and all of them have been notified, and we recommended that they self-quarantine. We have not received reports that anyone else has tested positive. The adjunct was an all online adjunct, and essentially the only reason that person even reported it is because they were on campus, I believe on February 21st, to ironically cover a class for another faculty member. And so they were only there for essentially that one class, and they have tested positive as well. And then we have these 2 folks out of North Harris yesterday that we still are trying to get a hold of. And so let me explain that. So we get an email or a phone call usually forwarded to us from students in particular. We're seeing this. Students will tell us, I have COVID-19. And then we have a not so easy time getting a hold of them to ask them, when is the last time that you were on college property? Have you gotten a test? How far along are you since you started having symptoms? And so we are sort of tracking that. And so that is our report. And so again, with regard to how many employees and how many students, it changes every about 6 hours as we get those reports. And so usually as soon as we get a new confirmed positive, it goes to, if it's an employee, it goes to HR, and then HR reaches out to them. If it's a student, it goes to Sandra Gregerson in governance, accountability, and compliance. And then governance, accountability, and compliance is responsible for reporting it to the state. And then essentially they generate that report that Dr. Head and I get twice a day. And so that's basically the amount of cases that we've had and sort of where we are with them. I'll move on to discussing the facilities. So to get access to our facilities, you basically have to get permission from either myself or Dr. Head. You can go to Chief Willingham, but Chief Willingham always comes and confers with me. And if I can, I usually confer with Dr. Head. We get some off hours requests. And so this is kind of a 24/7 thing. You know, we've had water lines bust at Kingwood, for example. We had a sprinkler break at Cy-Fair. And so those things happen off hours. And so we can basically divide up access into 3 categories, the types of access that we're giving. The first one is sort of legal obligations, right? And so we have to let someone into payroll, for example, to cash, to write certain checks to folks that for whatever reason don't have direct deposit, or some folks only take hard checks, so we have to let those folks in. We have certain obligations that we have to do in person for the Department of Education. We have contractual obligations to tenants. So we have tenants at UP that themselves are essential businesses. We have public institutions like universities that are essential businesses themselves. And so we have to basically allow them either contractually or as a matter of law into their properties because they're essential businesses. The next group is facilities. And so in facilities, we have someone has to basically collect the mail. We have power plants that have to be maintained. We have to have plumbers, electricians, et cetera, coming to check those things. As Dr. Head mentioned earlier, we have landscaping and not just mowing the lawns. We have to have the trees trimmed, pest control. We also have remediation, you know, as we allow people to do deep cleaning and sort of different types of contractors as well. And then as Dr. Head mentioned, the watering of plants. And so everything now is organized at my level. So we have a landscaping schedule, and every college has been assigned a slot wherein they are slated to get their lawn care and landscaping done. Same thing with watering of plants. And then the last group is OTS. Our IT department has essentially 2 types of access. We have server maintenance. Obviously, all of this is running on our servers, all of our emails, et cetera. And so there's sort of certain routine things that they have to access to. And then, of course, just like the police department, we have cyber criminals that we have folks on staff that need to have access in case of a cyber emergency. And so those are the 3 groups. So again, we have police officers patrolling all 5 million of our square feet. On any given day in the police department and the Department of Emergency Preparedness, we have roughly about 20 employees working. We have all the officers trying to work at most 2 12-hour shifts. So we're trying to make sure that when the officers come to work, we minimize their exposure. Dispatchers work 2 or 3 12-hour shifts. We've separated the dispatchers into separate rooms. So we actually have about 3 or 4 different dispatch rooms so that the dispatchers don't have to sit together. And then we basically have been able to provide, we're very fortunate that we've been able to provide all of our officers with a robust amount of PPE. You know, particularly, for example, N95s are really hard to get, and I'm quite proud to say that all of our officers get one every shift, as well as our PSOs. And so we have enough right now to last us for PPE purposes until about mid-May. And so if that's something that if the board has leads on sort of where we can get PPE, that would be something that would be really, really helpful to us. As you can imagine, it's really difficult to get. We're good until mid-May, and I think we're going to be good right now until mid-June with some orders that we've got reported today. But let me just give you some statistics on the police department. We've had 2,254 police patrols. We've unlocked 220 doors. We've had 45 alarm responses, and we've had 417 miscellaneous calls for service. So like Dr. Head said, the police department has really gone above and beyond, particularly our sworn personnel. They took an oath and they take that oath very seriously, and they expose themselves every single day so that people like me can basically sit in this little command center of mine and not have to expose myself the way that they expose themselves every day and their families. So I am very grateful for their service. And I guess that wraps up sort of what my prepared comments were. Dr. Head, I'll hand it back over to you, sir.
And Link, let's move to the next one with Dr. Smith.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dwight.
Hello. I'm going to talk briefly about the migration of courses online, give you an idea of the magnitude of what's been going on since really spring break. So in the spring, we had over 8,500 course sections offered. A little over 700 were completed by spring break. 461 of them were online. Since spring break, there are over 7,700 course sections offered. And through the work of the Vice President's Instruction, Valerie Jones, Linda Head, deans, department chairs, they went through an analysis of the courses and determined whether or not courses should be or could be migrated at 100% online. And I will get to it shortly. There are other courses that, because of accreditation, certification, licensing, or just the nature of the workforce skill, was determined that it was best to try to offer them where it can in a hybrid format, or we would need to provide some type of face-to-face learning, and I'll get to that. I will say through the migration, faculty have been very helpful in moving forward. Certainly, as you can see, we've had and have been offering online courses for some time, and we certainly have champions and leaders in that area who've been helpful to their colleagues. In addition, we've been organizing training for faculty with regards to various technology tools that they can utilize to help students learn in this new environment. And we've worked with organizational development, which also has been offering a variety of workshops for our faculty to prepare them to teach in this new environment. So let me move on to, Link, if you would, to the next slide. There were still about 480 course sections that were determined that still needed face-to-face or were offered in hybrid modalities, which means that it's a combination of face-to-face and learning online. These courses were identified again for licensing, accreditation, workforce skills. There are expectations, for instance, with regards to nursing, the amount of simulation experiences students can have. They still need clinical experiences. Someone wanting to learn to be a welder still needs to demonstrate their competency in welding. So we still needed to take that into account. And with the work of Linda Head and the workforce deans and the health occupation deans, they developed the protocols that you see before you to ensure the health and safety of faculty and staff who would be in these clinical settings and labs. And then if we can go forward, again, Link. And next, to give you an idea of the magnitude of faculty involved, go back to that slide, thank you. We've had almost 2,400 instructors transitioning from face-to-face to hybrid. Little over 2,600 are certified to teach online. That's 87% of the instructors that are employed during the spring term. And little of those 2,600, to give you an idea of the breakout between full-time and part-time adjunct, I'm sorry. You see a little 100 were full-time, about 1,850 instructors. And again, they have been supported with instructional designers who work with them in designing the course. They have been provided webinars and other tools through LSC Online to be supportive of this transition. And I know the VPIs, deans, department chairs have been working very closely with these instructors so that they are providing a high quality learning environment for students and are supportive of students as they migrate to this new way of learning and understand, we all understand, students as well, our faculty are confronting some challenges in their lives. So we want to be compassionate with regards to students during this time. And everyone understands that and are working to communicate with students so that they are successful. Thank you.
Thank you. So next is Jennifer Mott, who is going to go through the finances.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi, so just to get started here, I'm taking it first, just looking at this current fiscal year 2020, which ends August 31st, 2020. Right, what you see in front of you is our current best estimate on the costs so far. About 9 million of this is in revenue losses and another 4.6 million in additional expenditures. You can see through the list, first we did pretty immediately start to waive the distance learning fee as we converted classes to online. So that is a revenue hit there of about 1.5 million. Right now, the largest item here, though, is trying to see what is going to happen in summer enrollments. Currently, enrollment is down 40%. So there is where we're estimating 6.4 million of revenue loss. If you remember, as the board's approved budget, we had assumed a 2.5% growth rate for the entire year. So for the summer, right now, the reports are looking at a 40% decline. That could improve between now and then, but we are including our best estimates that we have currently. We are still working on what is the process and criteria for issuing refunds if any students wish to withdraw at this point in time. But depending on what gets worked out there, we are just estimating for now about $1 million here in lost revenue. So those are what comprises the revenue loss. For expenditures, we have the deep cleaning of our facilities. We've already completed one deep cleaning of all of our facilities, and we are close to having a second one scheduled here that would occur probably towards the end of April and into the beginning of May to have a second cleaning of all of our facilities. But I've included there the possibility of doing a third time over the summer. As Mario mentioned, we've needed to purchase the PPE, the personal protective equipment for our police, so we have expenses there. And as Dwight has talked about, the conversion to online instruction, we've hired instructional designers to assist with those efforts. So we have expenses there. And then currently under consideration that I believe Dr. Head has been discussing with Link is there an ability for us to provide computers in some way for students as we try to deal with students' access to the online learning. So that brings us to 13.5 million costs in this current fiscal year. Next slide, please. So to summarize the impact of that on this current fiscal year, to try to offset this, Dr. had mentioned we have both a budget and a hiring freeze. So first we had instituted the hiring freeze. Now we are working on a process for a budget freeze of all non-personnel expenses. I do want to make sure that is clear that all employees are continuing to be paid as prior communications have indicated and have gone out about that. So this budget freeze is on the remaining non-personnel expenses. And so we are working through that process currently with all of the business areas to make sure we still have essential spending occurring, but freezing any non-essential spending. So there I'm currently estimating 5.7 million that we can sweep from this current year's budget to help cover this $13.5 million cost. That leaves us with a shortfall of 7.8 million. And as Dr. Head has mentioned, there are stimulus funds, and yes, there's been communications coming in today with more details about that. Currently, where that stands is we should be getting about 28 million in total. It requires us to use 50% of it directly to students in the form of emergency financial aid assistance. So that's why you see 14 million here, because then it's the remaining 50% that we are allowed to use to cover expenses and revenue loss. So this is showing that 14 million that we can use to cover our expenses. So not shown here, like I'm mentioning, is another 14 million that would go directly to students for financial aid assistance. So we would use 7.8 million out of this stimulus to cover this year's shortfall, and that leaves 6.2 million to roll into fiscal year 2021. Next slide, please. So as we start to look to the next budget year, right, we were in the middle of building that budget, and of course we are having to relook at the whole thing. And as Dr. had mentioned, we are going to be talking about what that new budget calendar looks like. Typically, we bring the budget to the board at the beginning of August for approval for the September 1 fiscal year start. So just from what we had originally been outlining for the budget, this is showing you what I'm seeing as impacts and costs to fiscal year 2021's budget. The first being the delay to the tuition increase, right? In March, the board had approved increasing tuition in fall of 2020. From prior discussions, it was already decided to delay that tuition increase to the spring of 2021. Right now, so this is still just a proposal, which is why there's a question mark there. Right now, I guess we'd like to discuss delaying that further to fall of 2021 for in-district students. But so if we do that, that would be an impact of 8.2 million to next year's budget in revenues that we had been anticipating. So those new anticipated revenues would be lower by the 8.2 million. In addition to that, in enrollment growth, right, we had been looking at assuming a 2.5% growth rate for next year, but now with this occurring, we've set that to flat. And really, that's going to be a number in particular that we're going to need to continue to update as we get closer. Fall registration doesn't open until April 15th. So hopefully in a couple weeks here, we'll start to be able to get more visibility into what fall enrollment growth looks like. But there, because we had been assuming 2.5% growth, and now I've just put that to 0 until we can get more data there, that's another 3 million in anticipated revenue that we expect to not see. So that's 3 million. And then in terms of expenditures, the majority of the expenditures that I just showed are one-time expenses that occurs during this period now. But in terms of our online teaching capabilities, we would look at a $1.3 million permanent increase to the online instructional budget. So that brings us to a cost of $12.4 million in fiscal year 2021. As I had mentioned in the prior slide, of the $14 million in stimulus, we would have an estimated 6.2 million remaining to roll into fiscal year 2021. So of course we could use that first to cover roughly half of next year's anticipated costs. Clearly that doesn't cover the entire amount, and a lot of these numbers are still estimates or our best estimates at this point in time. So we're trying to just be very cautious with what we're looking at building into next year's budget to cover the remaining shortfall and to cover any remaining unknowns. So that's where we're definitely looking at flat budgets pretty much across the board. And then the across the board pay increases, we perhaps could look at a mid-year implementation of that, just as I mentioned, so we can enter 2021 cautiously. We could go to the next slide, please. So finally, just to sort of sum up the strategy we've been using, again, even in, I think it's the same article Dr. Head referenced in the beginning that he had sent me. For a lot of businesses going through this right now, they're saying cash is king. I mean, thankfully, we are in a good position with our cash reserves, but that is still financially a key thing for us to watch closely. So there, I do really want us to strive to stay at our 16% cash reserve. With all of the numbers that I just showed you, that would put us at the end of fiscal year 2021, potentially at around 17.5%, which is above 16, clearly. But at least that gives us some cushion. As I said, I still feel like there's a lot of unknowns in these numbers. So I'm would really like to kind of hold that steady. That way we have the reserves still to be available there if the crisis gets worse. We're about to head into hurricane season. If in other future things that might happen, I just want to make sure that we strive to wait as long as possible before we start going into those cash reserves. Yes.
If, so just to be clear to the board, so when she says that we'll be at 17.5%, that's about $6 million. So.
Yes, it's about, so my projections right now has us ending fiscal year 2021 at about 5.8 million above the 16%. So that 5.8 million is, I guess, what I've been viewing as a cushion for a lot of our estimates of these costs and impacts being unknowns. That way, if some of these numbers grow into larger cost, larger revenue impacts, we still have some room to absorb that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, board, you can't tell right now, but there's a distinct, but we have the opportunity to grow with online. And we know that a lot of the high school students right now, they don't want to go off and their parents aren't going to send them off. And then with a lot of people being laid off, and it just depends on how long it takes the economy to get going again. So we're going to be prepared for growth and online, and we will put money in the budget to make sure that we offer the sections that we need to offer. And the presidents know that. So we got an opportunity here. We're planning for the kind of the worst case scenario and hoping for good. If we grow, then you see those numbers start flipping.
Yeah, certainly if obviously that would be amazing if we start growing, but sort of preparing for if for example, enrollment next year is down 5%, that is about 6.2 million. So a decline in enrollment next year of 5% would pretty much eat up that remaining cushion that I have in the current projections, which is part of why I want to be very cautious about it, because depending on how all this goes, we probably want that cushion there to deal with something like that. And then on top of that, like once we get past this and want to be able to return to normal, the more we've held on to these cash reserves, we'll have a greater ability to just focus on restoring and growing our operations instead of needing to replenish those reserves. So that's where I think throughout this crisis, the cash reserves financially is one of the key focuses. And then from there, as I guess I've kind of already mentioned this, just a kind of a cautious return to normal. With the budget freeze of all non-personnel, expenditures. A lot of that is, yes, true savings, but a lot of it is also delayed expenditures, things that we are going to need to come back later and purchase. So we would want to look at those items, look at making sure we're growing and maintaining the larger presence of the online learning. And then we can look at restoring some of the new initiatives that had already been under discussion before and get there. And finally, a little bit more of a longer term picture, just reviewing what our budget allocation is between online and face-to-face courses. That's the discussion that has already started. But then also a full review of our remaining bond projects and how our space is utilized after this. Depending on how permanent of a change occurs in our operations, we may want to consider changing where some of the bond projects in the remainder of our bond program goes towards to maybe refocus on addressing some of the new facility needs that we might see coming out of this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Smith, that concludes our overview.
Yeah, and I guess it's fair to ask the other board members if they have any questions that they would like the panel to address.
Yeah, this is Mike Stoma.
Yes.
A second. Jennifer, let me ask you. I assume you're doing some what if scenarios. What if, for one, I think a worst case scenario, what if the spring enrollment reflects that of summer one, where you have a 40% decrease? Now, I'm not asking you for the specific answers to this, but my point is this: you have to go. I believe you're going to have to plan for extremes. And what I see is if we permit people to collect in any way, shape, or form on these campuses before testing is available for everyone for this virus, before treatments are available for everyone on this virus, or there's a vaccine available like the flu vaccine. You could liken this to the flu. You know, every year people are encouraged to get a flu vaccine to keep people getting the flu. And you somewhat tend to isolate, you know, if you think you have the flu. Well, this is much worse. And I can only imagine if indeed, you know, we're premature in our judgments. I'm sure we're going to be looking at the authorities, but we're premature in our judgments, you know, of allowing people to gather again for whatever the reasons. And you know, one of these, you know, coronavirus instances pops up. It could cause a significant disruption, among other things. But I see here people talk about going back to normal. I'm out of work. I'd like to go back to normal, but I don't think we're going back to normal. And how does this economy restart? And with everything that's going on, nobody knows. So I would plan. My advice is to plan for worst case. Plan for the absolute worst case you think could happen. If you're seeing 40% reduction in summer, I would have a financial model that reflects that, you know, in this for the spring, just for planning purposes. And then whatever happens for the best happens. But that way, you know what you're up against on an extreme. And you're right, if we get a hurricane, that complicates things. But just for this virus planning, that's my recommendation to you. Otherwise, you know, I don't know what to tell you.
Mike, this is Steve Head. I agree with you. You know, we will have in Dwight's conversation. So what we're asking the faculty to do right now for the fall is, yes, we can plan on some face-to-face but we want them to be prepared to go to online because we're just not sure. I mean, if we have a second round or whatever it may be, or if we're just not clear. And I think we're going to have a pretty good view of what's going on later during the summer so we can see the fall. But yes, we'll come back. Good point. I mean, I agree with you. We'll come back with like worst case scenarios. Because I didn't think this would happen, but that could happen. Yes. So, okay. Good point.
Chair Mike Sullivan would like to chime in.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mike.
Steve, Jennifer, a couple of questions. But first of all, a quick comment with with respect to what Stoma just said about planning. And Steve, I'd sent you a note on this about the possibility of preparing kind of a worst case scenario, if you will, with respect to revenue and enrollment. So maybe that will be forthcoming when you have time. It's not anything you have to do right now, because I think right now we have to plan for the short term as well as the long term.
Sure.
Those tracks aren't necessarily parallel. So 2 questions, if I may. Jennifer, in your slide, you had a note that there would be a 40% decline in summer. So I have a couple of questions with that. One, is that based on summer 1 and summer 2? Is it based on this point in time, or is it an estimate of some future point in time, like the end of summer 2?
It is summer 1 and 2, but it is an estimate at this point in time. Our analytics area sends out a daily email with what the enrollment growth looks like. So that is what that is based on. So that's where it's at today. I will note too, just in terms of percentages, right? So, I mean, just in general, the size of the summer term is significantly smaller than fall and spring. So just mathematically, that makes it easier to have, in terms of actual numbers, a higher percentage. So whereas the fall is a much larger enrollment.
Okay.
So right,
Good-
that
good
changes
answer.
that percentage impact. But that's where I'm pulling that data directly from where today the enrollment.
Okay, and then a question for Steve Head, please. Steve, you've mentioned a couple of times that, quote unquote, we've lost 60 students. What does that mean, and what's it in relation to, please?
Well, okay, so what I was looking for was, if I understand the question, I was trying to measure the impact of the virus by comparing drops. Part of that we were doing to see, we feel like we need to refund students who've dropped because of the virus. And with the stimulus money, we're going to be able to do that. But so we're doing we started out doing a comparison day by day, and really it's what happened after roughly March the 15th. If they dropped before that, the virus didn't have anything to do with it. So we were past the refund period. So last year, I believe in 2019, totally we had about 1,900 students that dropped. So we're doing the comparison. So far, we've only had 200 drop, but we moved the drop date back to give the students, and the fact that came from the faculty to ask to do that, to give them more time to work with the students. So we've moved the drop date back to May 1, and then we'll see. We'll just see what happens. So we're trying to keep those students enrolled, and we'll see what happens. And that's the reason I mentioned the $1 million maybe in refund. That just came from we're hoping that we can keep these students down and keep those refunds down. I'm not worried about the money. We want them to stay in school. I mean, the money's a part of it, of course, but we want them to try to stay in school.
Sure. And then just two more quick questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Well, go ahead.
Steve, it's a question, and forgive me for phrasing it this way. We can survive with or without the stimulus money. Is that right?
That's correct.
So with the stimulus money that we might receive, or we're anticipating receiving based on recent communications, that puts us in a better financial position and lessens the short-term pain.
Yes.
Okay.
We have.
And last question with respect to the stimulus, and then I'll bail out. Is where does this dollar figure that we're expecting from the stimulus come from? Is it a formula? Is it an application that we made? Where's that number come from?
It's a formula. We have received official notification of the money. It came in right before this meeting started, like 10 minutes before the meeting started. So we're going to receive a little over $28 million. And that is based on what they call ABATES. It's reports that we send in every year. And then there's a percentage of it based on the number of Pell Grants that we have, and then the number of regular students we have. And that's in comparison to everybody else. So they've just taken this money that they had, which I think was something like 19 billion. And I have an email that I'll forward to the board, that the official note from the Department of Ed that just came in. So that's the way they have it carved up. But we have received official notification that we'll receive the $28 million, half of it right now, and then the other half is coming in later. And actually, in the note itself, it tells us the discretion that we have with students. So
Do you think that's unique, the number that we're getting? Is that unique for community colleges, or are we in
it's
the
all
same
of them.
pot with UT?
Yeah, it's all the colleges. They carved it up. Anybody that's receiving federal money, is the way I understand it, is part of that formula. So I'll send you, there's a long list. I'll send you the email shortly so you can see this long list in there.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions, board members?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, Art.
Okay. My question, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. In terms of trying to find out the enrollment for the summer, I know there's all these unknown variables. And do we know what percentage of the first session or the summer session are high school seniors? I mean, is there any way to kind of determine what impact that might have on that? I mean, are we looking at that at all, or?
Yeah, we are. I can answer that if you don't mind. And
Oh, go ahead.
we've been reaching out to the ISDs, and we're trying to, I mean, that's a really good issue, and that's a big one for us, is making this transition. We've been trying to coordinate, or we will coordinate our schedules with the ISDs. And I mean, I know in a previous conversation, as soon as we got off that, as soon as we had that conversation, I sent a note to Dr. Napolis to make sure we talk with the presidents and the superintendents over how that transition is going to look. And I think that summer term, that first summer term, is going to be the key of how we work with these students and make sure that they're ready to go. I mean, that they're ready for college work. We're on that. I can't tell you exactly right now what that looks like, but it is a major issue with us. As soon as I put it in the presentation, I'll let you know once we, you know, we've got May 4th as the start. I don't know. That just depends on what the ISDs do and what the county judges do and what CDC recommends. And we know that that's a big issue, though.
Okay, and my next question, one more question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
In terms of coming up with estimates or projections, I'm just curious. You know, I'm tend to agree with Mike Stoma on this, and but we have to look at that worst case scenario, right? But also, you know, these government proposals or instructions that we're going to get, they're going to come down, whether it's state or national. Are there, I mean, are they coming up with some kind of a, because I know that the new normal is going to require us to spend money to protect us against that, right? And I know that Mario mentioned some of the great work our officers are doing, and some of the ways we're checking to make sure they're safe, people are safe coming in. But I would imagine that, I mean, as we speak, there'll probably be some standards that are being created that it's going to cost us money to implement, you know, in the fall maybe, before anything, and you know, whether it's checking temperature, I don't know, some of the other things that people are doing, but just I think it would be a good idea, and I'm sure it'll come down as far as kind of estimates. Is that going to be in the millions? Is that going to be, you know, something that we already doing? You know, just I know you don't have to have an answer for me, but I mean that's I think that kind of thing that kind of keeps me awake at night.
Okay.
Not knowing.
We'll follow up with you. I think when you read, we have some, just so you'll know, we have the general guidelines, and I do mean they're general, and basically they're letting us set the criteria and with some suggestions.
Sure.
And so we'll have our group working on that, how best we can. I mean, there's two parts to this. Half the stimulus money goes to students, and that could be with food, financial aid, technology, transportation, and we've already been talking about how we might want to do that. Then the other half goes to cover losses and operations. So now that we have, today is the first time that we've actually had some guidance. I mean, they wrote it down, but not specifically. They're leaving a lot of it to us. They just want to be consistent, and then we need to be able to follow up on that and show them that we spent the money like it's supposed to be spent. I don't know over the other. There's another round of stimulus money, is what we're being told, that may come into education, and then we may get additional money for being a Hispanic serving institution. We've been told there's probably additional money coming in. So we'll know a little bit more as the summer goes on.
Okay, thank you.
Question now.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. This is Mary.
Yes. Go ahead.
This question is for Jennifer. With the financials, Jennifer, the financials that you just showed, does that also take in consideration the losses for what we had for Harvey?
Sorry, trying to get myself turned back on. You were asking, does it include the losses from Harvey?
Does it? Yes, because I know that we still had, okay.
Yep, no, we still have that. We're still working with FEMA to try to get more funds in. They assigned us another new project director, so that is kind of continuing as it was. So yes, we are still working on getting those Harvey expenses reimbursed by FEMA.
So the financials that we're seeing now, it also includes what we don't have from FEMA, correct?
Yeah, yes, correct. I mean, yes, in our books in the financials, yes, I have already accounting for yes, we are still anticipating being reimbursed by FEMA. Obviously, it's the timing that is long-term and unknown, but our financials are still anticipating an eventual reimbursement.
Oh, if that money comes in though, and I'm not trying to read into her question, but if that, just for me, if that money comes in, then that adds to our operating budget if we choose to add it to the operating budget. Is that accurate?
No, it does not add to our budget. It adds to our cash, which are different things.
Okay.
It adds to our cash. It does not add to our budget, essentially because we've already spent the money and but in our financials, we are anticipating the reimbursement of the money. So we basically loaned ourselves the funds essentially, and FEMA would be paying us back. So it would be replenishing our cash, but it would not be adding to our budget capacity.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I just wanted to make sure that my question was it included already in the financials that that you make, what we're losing because of COVID-19, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly included in the sense that as I estimate the impact on our cash, our cash, and what we spend on Harvey is out the door. So it's included in that sense, in that money's gone. As FEMA reimburses us, then that's cash that comes back to us.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Sure.
I think, Linda, did you have a question? Any other questions?
Yes. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes. Who's that?
This is Trustee Pierce. You can't see me, but can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Had some kind of glitch, couldn't get in as a panel, but got in as an attendee. Listen, I have a very serious question. I want to piggyback on a lot of what has been said about, loss of revenue or what revenue we have, but I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know what COVID-19, what's going to happen here. You have, with what's going on with the millions of people in unemployment, you have a lot of employees out here who are very, very nervous. What I want to know, and I did email Steve and ask him, does Lone Star have a RIF policy in place? RIF meaning reduction in force. It may come to that. We don't want it to come to that, please believe me, but we do not know what is coming down the line. And if push comes to shove, people are concerned about, are they going to have a job, or who's going to do what? But does Lone Star have a RIF policy in place? That is my question.
Trustee Pierce, this is Steve Head. Yeah,
Steve.
Sent that. I'm not sure you saw the email yesterday, but we actually have a board policy over that.
Okay,
Basically, the board would decide, I mean, we would make recommendations if that were the case, but then the board would vote on that.
okay, now, is there a policy though, Steve? I mean, it might have been there before you got there because you probably didn't have to use it. But does Lone Star from even years ago have any, most entities, state entities do have a RIF policy, but is there anything in writing that the board could peruse? I would, as a board member, like to see the policy, if it exists. If it's not one, I understand, we need to get one.
It's in there already. I'll send it out to everybody as soon as
Please.
we get through with this meeting.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm done, okay.
Any other questions?
Mike Sullivan, but I don't want to leapfrog over anybody else.
Go ahead, Mike.
Steve, if I could ask you a couple things, and this is more into programming. It might be premature to be talking about this, but given the current state of the oil industry, could you give some thought to what our oil and gas efforts look like going forward? You don't have to answer that now. The resources that it consumes and investments that have been planned, projects currently in progress. And then secondly, is now a time, and I'm not suggesting this, it's honestly just a question, is now a time for us to consider ramping up the cybersecurity program in more soft skill, technical, intellectual programs instead of workforce hands-on programs?
Yes, okay. Yeah, we've been, on the oil and gas, I will just tell you that we've been giving that a lot of thought. And I'm going to come back to the board with a recommendation over what we ought to be doing with that. And on the security, I probably either if you could maybe just send me an email about what you're talking about. We are taking a look at different programs though, and know that I think we all agree the way we've been doing things is not, we need to change the way we're doing things and take a look at new innovations and a lot of online and more of the technical stuff. I mean, the technology based programming than what we've had in the past. So there's just some balance in there, but yes, I'll give you I'll give you an update on oil and gas. And on the other, if you could just send me a note about maybe what you're talking about.
Sure. Let me add just a little bit to it, might help. I thought we had been given the go ahead for a 4-year cybersecurity degree.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm thinking is that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Steve, there's one thing that I saw this morning in the paper. I don't know whether it will impact us or not, but a couple of the large charter schools will not have any more school the rest of the year. And some of the ISDs that have gone online, they've reported they're having difficulties getting their students to complete assignments.
Right.
And I guess this is a follow-up to Art's question.
Right.
The type of students that we get, especially from certain areas, may be a little bit less efficient than they were before because of the loss of 3 months of our skill building. And that may impact our instructional model too, to some extent, with those students.
Absolutely. If I had to put something at the top of the list about our students, it is the students coming directly out of high school right now. Some are going to be better prepared than others because some of the ISDs had already been moved into technology, and some of the earlier discussions we had were about digital books and how we might be doing that, and even moving online. We already were having some of these discussions before. I think what's happening right now is accelerating that. But we've got, I have it listed under equity gaps, and that's the way it is. Some areas are more advanced than others, and we need to pay attention to everybody. So one of the recommendations we're going to come back, we're taking a look at what that means if we go heavy into online, which is that's going to be what I think we should be doing. We have to help these students with this. I mean, we just can't throw it out there and go, here it is. And our faculty, I might add that too, but a lot of the students just don't use technology the way the way other students do. They just don't. So,
A lot of them don't have it either.
right. It's a major, major issue for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There are no other questions. Dr. Ed, you want to move to our future board meetings?
Yeah, board, we were looking, here's the problem with our regular schedule. With two things. One is we're thinking that we need to go video for May and June, and if we have one in July, and then we'll take a look and see how things go. If I mean, it's the board's decision, but we would like to get back on a regular schedule sometime around the 1st of September, if that's possible. And we know that we might have to make provisions for social distancing and 6 feet, and there's things that we can do to probably help that. But number one, we're talking about the next meeting being May the 14th, which would move our meeting back. And the reason for that is if we don't come back until May the 4th, we're not going to have time to put the board agenda together. And because there's a lot of work that goes in, and we just can't do that on like this, like remotely. Then if we move that meeting, then we're talking about moving the June meeting back. So we're going to be sending really a question to you about moving the next meeting, formal meeting, back to May the 14th. And then the one after that would be June the 11th. And we can send some emails over that to give you the reasons why. We're trying to give ourselves and you the opportunity to put our agendas together and make sure we've got enough time. But again, the big issue right now is we're not planning on coming back before May the 4th. So we can't get the next board meeting agenda ready in time. That's just not enough time, and to get it to you in advance. So I know we can't make decisions right now, but we're going to send a note out about that to see what the thoughts are about that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Chairman, with our legal counsel, Mary, do you have any updates on any state rules or any kind of changes in terms of open meetings and all that? I mean, I really haven't kept up with that. And do you have anything to report on that?
No, other than the communication in terms of the suspension of certain rules that we had talked about. I can provide, there hasn't been anything since the AG came out with that, with the Attorney General suspending some of the rules.
Okay. Thanks. Just keep us posted.
Will do.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. Mike Sullivan.
Okay.
I certainly don't develop the agenda. I'm just one of the board trustees, and I know we can't decide making decisions today, but I'd like to just give my personal perspective that on the May and June meetings, if they are video and remote, that we dispense with unnecessary reports, maybe just deal with issues that are timely and or required by law. And that's just a comment, doesn't require any feedback from anyone. And just keep our meetings as concise and tight as possible and allow the chancellor to conduct the business of the business of running the system as he has right now. Thank you.
Thank you. You read our mind. We've already had that discussion. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, I agree with you.
Okay. Any other updates? If not, any suggested our future agenda items for May 14th or June 11th meeting?
Mr. Chair, we'll put together some really worst case scenarios so that we can talk and see what that looks like.
Okay. All righty. Gotcha. If there are no other comments or questions, it is now 3:32 and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all very much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Great job,
Thank you all
Mr.
for
Chairman.
coming.
Great job.
Appreciate it. Very good meeting.